We begin with a single observation that pierces through the fog of noise. If people do not feel your words, they will not follow your voice. And so we must ask, what is it to speak? Not merely to be heard, but to be remembered for in the age of constant chatter. The leader is not the one who talks the most, but the one whose words echo in silence long after they have stopped speaking, talking. Like a leader is not about performance. It is not about using clever metaphors or commanding a stage with gestures and sound. It is about being utterly rooted in your own being and allowing the vibration of your essence to transmit through language. When you speak as a leader, you are not selling ideas, you are unfolding reality, you are not pushing people, you are awakening them, you are not convincing, you are inviting. And this only happens when your words are not an escape from your uncertainty, but an expression of your clarity. You cannot talk like a leader until you have sat with your own silence, until you have listened to the noise in your mind and found something still beneath it, something still and strong, something that does not need applause to feel real. And it is from that stillness that the true voice arises. When a leader speaks, there is no desperation in their tone, no hunger for validation, no urgency to impress. There is a quiet certainty, a subtle depth that says, I have thought through the chaos, and I bring you what remains. You see, most people speak to, survive to, be seen, to be noticed, to be acknowledged. But the leader speaks because they have already seen, they have already noticed, they have already acknowledged what is within, and now they can speak without trembling. When you own every word you say, when you say what you mean and mean what you say, you no longer fear misunderstanding. You no longer dilute your message to be liked. You simply say it as it is, not from arrogance, but from alignment. And the voice that emerges from that alignment does not need to be loud. It does not need to be poetic. It only needs to be real, because truth does not shout. It resonates. Leadership begins not with the accumulation of followers, but with the refinement of language. And the refinement of language begins with the refinement of thought. If your thoughts are scattered, your words will be scattered. If your intention is hidden, your communication will be foggy. But if you have sat long enough with your own mind, if you have examined your motives, if you have made peace with discomfort, then when you speak, there will be no excess, no filler, no flinching, just clean, direct, powerful presence, clothed in words. To talk like a leader is not to pretend to be strong. It is to be strong. It is to live a life that backs your words. It is to be so congruent with your values that your speech becomes a mirror of your being. And that is why the voice of a leader does not come from the mouth. It comes from the mind, shaped by thought, forged in fire, and steadied by stillness. To continue speaking as a leader, you must understand that clarity is not just a technical skill, it is a spiritual one. For the leader does not merely aim to be understood, they aim to leave no space for confusion, for in the absence of clarity, people do not simply misunderstand, they invent meaning. And what they invent is usually shaped by their fear, their doubt, their assumption that you did not mean what you said. And so talking like a leader is not about overloading the listener with words, it is about removing the unnecessary, so the necessary may speak. The greatest wisdoms are never delivered in excess. They are delivered in simplicity. And yet within that simplicity is enormous depth to speak clearly. You must first think clearly. And to think clearly, you must slow down your mind as a mirror. And if it is rippled by speed, by emotion, by noise, then whatever you try to reflect through your words will be distorted. People do not respond to the volume of your speech. They respond to its precision, to its timing, to its presence. If you speak with too many ideas at once, people drown, not because they cannot swim, but because they were never given a shore to begin with. So what do? You speak in still lines, not loops, not spirals, but lines that begin with intent and end with meaning. Clarity does not mean coldness, it means warmth delivered with focus. It means you have respected the moment enough to sharpen your thought before offering it like a gift, and the way you know whether your clarity has landed is by observing not whether people nod, but whether they breathe, whether they pause, whether they shift within. Because when you speak clearly from a place of stillness, you open up a space in the listener, a space that wants to now to receive more, not out of obligation, but out of resonance. And that resonance is how leadership begins to form, not through command, but through connection. When your voice is clear, your presence becomes a doorway. and people are not dragged. Through it, they walk willingly because they trust where you are. Leading them, when people trust your words, they will follow your silence too. And that is the mark of clarity, when even your pauses speak, when even your stillness instructs. And so to speak, like a leader, you must become clear not only in your language, but in your energy, your tone, your face, your hands. For all of it is part of the message. All of it is the voice. And if one part contradicts the other, people will listen to the contradiction, not the content. Words are fragile when they are not backed by alignment, but when everything in you says the same thing, your message does not need persuasion, it becomes undeniable. And so we arrive at the third unfolding, which is the control of the voice for what is voice, if not the sound of the soul shaped by the breath. If your breath is erratic, your voice will shake. If your breath is shallow, your words will fade. And if your breath is held hostage by anxiety or urgency or a desperate need to be right, then your message will never arrive intact. To speak like a leader is not merely to form sentences, it is to carry energy across the invisible space between you and the other. To do this, your voice must not only be heard, it must be held, it must be steady and deliberate, for the voice is not a weapon, it is an instrument, and instruments must be tuned before they can be played. You do not need to shout to be strong, and you do not need to perform to be powerful. You need only to become aware of how sound leaves your body, and how that sound either invites or repels, either softens or hardens, either calms or disturbs. People follow a steady voice, not because it dominates, but because it reassures. It becomes a lighthouse in the storm, not by being taller than the waves, but by remaining constant amidst them. A trembling voice tells the listener that the speaker does not trust their own message. A sharp voice tells them that the speaker is fighting a battle within that has nothing to do with the conversation. A steady voice tells them that the speaker has already done the inner work and is here only to serve clarity, not self-protection, control of. The voice is not about rigidity, it is about resonance. You can only resonate when your own instrument is free of distortion. You can only resonate when you are not using your voice to protect your ego, but to project your purpose. And the way to build that control is not through force, but through practice, by becoming intimate with your own tone, with your own pauses, with the rise and fall of your energy. When you are calm, your voice becomes calm. When you are clear, your voice becomes clear. And when you are grounded, your voice becomes grounding in this way. Speech becomes meditation. Leadership becomes music. The sound of one who is no longer trying to convince, but is simply allowing truth to move through them. And if there is one thing people long for, it is truth. Not dressed up, not disguised, not sugar-coated, but offered in a voice that says, I have no need to deceive, no reason to please, no hunger for approval, only the wish to speak what is real, from a place that has earned the right to be heard. And now we enter the heart of influence, which is not found in the act of speaking, but in the effect your words create. For what use is eloquence if it changes nothing? What value is speech if it stirs no movement in the soul of the listener? To talk, like a leader, is not to speak for entertainment or validation or cleverness. It is to speak in a way that causes something to shift. Not later, not eventually, but now the words of a leader do not float. They land. They do not decorate. They penetrate. And they do not seek applause. They seek transformation. You must begin to understand that the human being is not moved by information, but by revelation, by the sudden realization that something old must fall and something new must begin. Your words must carry that spark, not by force, but by direction, not by volume, but by alignment. People are flooded with noise every day, flooded with opinion, flooded with suggestions, flooded with instructions, and yet they remain unmoved because most of what they hear is not directed at the core, but at the surface. So if you wish to move them, speak not to their intellect, but to their decision. Speak not to their comfort, but to their hesitation. Speak not to their habits, but to their longing. And how do you do this? Not with grand statements, but with focused truth. A leader does not say more. They say what matters, and they say it once, and let the silence do the rest. Do not repeat yourself out of fear that they did not hear you speak once with strength, and believe that the words will do what they are meant to do. And when you speak, speak in a way that carries urgency, not panic, but pressure. The gentle but unmistakable pressure of this cannot wait, of this must be done now, because the cost of delay is too high. People do not move until the cost of staying becomes greater than the fear of changing your words. They must point to that cost. They must show what is lost by standing still, not with shame, but with honesty. And when people feel that pressure, they wake up, not because you pushed them, but because you opened a door that they had been afraid to walk through. Your job is not to drag them through it. Your job is to speak with such clarity, such simplicity, such strength, that they begin to walk on their own. And that is the beginning of transformation, not through persuasion, but through presence. The presence of a voice that carries direction, not demand the presence of a speaker who does not speak from authority, but from authenticity. And when that presence is felt, people move, not because you told them to, but because they cannot return to sleep in the presence of truth. So we continue and arrive at the realization that it is not just the message, but the choice of words that defines a leader. For not all words carry the same weight. Some are light and float away, some are sharp and cut. But strong words do not hurt and do not vanish. They remain, they root, they build a quiet sense of respect, not through intimidation, but through precision. To speak like a leader is to learn the art of word selection, not for ornament, but for alignment. You do not need complex language, you need committed language. Every sentence must be a decision, every word a reflection of certainty. For when your words are scattered, your influence scatters with them, and the mind of the listener becomes foggy. But when your words are intentional, clean, distilled, your presence becomes magnetic. The room quiets, not because you shouted, but because you no longer dilute what you mean. When you say, I think you are unsure, when you say, maybe you are hesitant, when you say you are inviting confusion. And people do not follow confusion, they follow conviction, conviction that is not performed, but lived. A leader does not use strength to overpower, they use strength to clarify. They remove the fluff, the filler, the unnecessary scaffolding, and they leave the message, standing alone, bare and strong. And when you speak in this way, people do not simply listen, they absorb. You are not explaining, you are embodying, and this embodiment is what earns attention. For we must remember that attention is not given, it is taken not through force, but through value. When people sense that your words are rooted in experience, not theory and clarity, not cleverness and purpose, not performance, they lean in because something inside them recognizes something real. This is why the discipline of strong language is so important, not harsh, not rude, but solid language that reflects a solid life. For if your words are stronger than your actions, your voice will feel hollow. But when your actions and your words rise together like two wings, then you no longer have to convince anyone. They feel it, they see it, and they know this is someone who has earned the right to speak. And so your task is not to sound impressive, it is to become aligned. And from that alignment, choose your words like a sculptor chooses stone, not to show off, but to shape something lasting, something people can carry with them long after the sound has ended. Now we must turn our attention inward to the subtle habit that erodes the presence of any leader, and that is the habit of weak talk. For weak talk is not always loud, it is not always visible, but it is always present when the speaker fears being wrong, when the speaker seeks constant reassurance, when the speaker softens their truth, so it might be accepted rather than heard. And here we must see the truth that the way you speak reveals the way you think, and if your words betray, doubt your message becomes diluted, and your presence becomes ignorable to speak. Like a leader, you must drop the need to be liked. You must drop the impulse to apologize for your existence. You must drop the tendency to wrap every truth in 10 layers of comfort. Leadership is not aggression. It is not domination. It is not shouting over silence, but it is strength. And strength is not something you perform. It is something you live. You do not say, I just think you say. I believe you do not say, it might be you. Say it is you. Do not say sorry for interrupting you. Say, I have something to add. This is not arrogance. It is clarity. This is not rudeness. It is rootedness. The leader is not someone who crushes opposition. They are someone who no longer shrinks from their own truth. And the shift begins in small decisions, in replacing soft language with clean speech, in choosing presence over passivity, in recognizing that the world will not remember how gently you phrased your truth, but how truly you stood in it. And when you drop the weak talk, Your voice does not become loud, it becomes undeniable. People will feel the difference. Not because you speak more, but because you speak from a place that is whole, a place that is resolved, a place that is no longer asking for permission to exist. And so your speech becomes efficient. No more loops, no more disclaimers, no more softening the edges of what must be said. You become a servant of clarity, and when clarity becomes your service, your voice begins to change. Not only how people hear you, but how they see themselves. Your strength gives them strength, your presence gives them permission, your discipline gives them direction. And this is how the leader becomes not a figure of control, but a force of liberation, not someone who speaks over others, but someone whose words help others find their own. And now we must confront the moment every leader eventually meets the moment of resistance, the moment when what you say is not welcomed, when your clarity is tested by confusion, when your strength is questioned by doubt. And this is where true leadership either begins or ends, for it is easy to speak when the room agrees, it is easy to sound strong when there is no pushback, but the test is not how well you speak when you are heard, it is how deeply you stand when you are challenged. To talk like a leader is to hold your ground, not with anger, not with force, but with stillness. You do not need to attack, you do not need to defend, you simply remain clear and rooted. And this presence in the face of pressure is what separates noise from influence. Most people shrink at the first sign of tension. They retreat, they over-explain, they bend their words to please, but the leader does not bend to every breeze. They do not trade their truth for comfort. They remain calm, even when the room trembles, because they have already made peace with who they are and what they stand for. You cannot talk like a leader if you change your voice every time someone raises theirs. Your voice must be anchored in something deeper than approval, and that anchor is built in solitude. It is built when no one is watching. It is built when you sit with your beliefs, challenge them, live them, test them, and then when the moment of resistance comes, you do not crumble. You remain still, like a mountain still, like truth itself. The opposition will come, not always loudly, sometimes as a smirk, sometimes as a passive question, sometimes as silence filled with judgment. But your role is not to chase harmony, it is to embody steadiness, for it is not your job to convince everyone. It is your responsibility to speak from your core and let the message find who it must find. And here is what happens when you do. People stop testing you. They start trusting you, not because you defeated them, but because you did not flinch, you did not fold, you did not run. And that is the essence of authority, not dominance, but consistency, not performance, but presence, not volume, but stillness. When the wind rises and your voice does not move, people know they are in the presence of someone who leads. Now we move toward refinement, the subtle discipline that defines whether your words dissolve into the air or remain long after the sound is gone, and that is the discipline of brevity. To talk like a leader is not to say much, but to say what is necessary. And then to stop for silence is not the absence of speech, it is the companion of clarity. Most people fear silence, they fill it with repetition, with explanation, with examples, but the leader respects silence. They use it as punctuation. They let the message land, and they do not rush to catch it. Once you have spoken with strength, let your words breathe, let them echo in the space, let them move through the mind of the listener, for impact does not happen during speech, it happens in reflection. And reflection cannot begin if your voice never ends, so you must become ruthless in trimming your words, not for harshness, but for purity. If your point can be said in one line, do not use 5. If your truth can be felt without a story, do not add one. And if your audience already understands, do not teach again. Respect their intelligence and trust the power of simplicity. People are not moved by how much you know they are moved, by how clearly you see. When you are tempted to say more, ask yourself, is this protecting my ego or serving my message? And if the answer is the former, choose silence. Not every sentence must convince, not every word must explain. Sometimes the most powerful statement is followed by nothing at all, because the strength of the message was enough. And that restraint, that confidence, that discipline is what people remember. You do not need to overwhelm people to reach them. You need to offer something real and then step back to let it do its work. To speak like a leader is to stop performing and start guiding, not with volume, not with detail, but with direction. And the way you direct is through simplicity. You aim your words like an arrow. You draw the string with intention, and then you release and you do not chase the arrow. You do not explain the motion, you trust. It will reach its mark, and if it does not, you do not panic. You adjust with stillness, not noise. This is the voice of leadership, not scattered, not hurried, not desperate, but clean, calm, complete. And now we arrive at the essence of influence, the hidden dimension of voice that few understand and even fewer master. It is the art of speaking to be remembered for. In a world full of voices, most are heard but quickly forgotten, they pass. Like wind, they fill the air but leave nothing behind to talk. Like a leader is not to echo the noise, but to become the stillness that stays. It is to speak in a way that lingers, that echoes, that finds a home in the quiet moments after the meeting, after the speech. After the conversation, you are not trying to impress, you are trying to imprint. And to do that, you must become intentional with every word for people. Remember, not your style, but your sincerity, not your performance, but your presence. They remember the weight, not the decoration, and they carry with them the truths that struck something within them, something real. So you must ask before you speak, what do I want to leave behind, not in memory alone, but in action, in clarity, in direction. And once you are clear on that, you shape your message around it. You remove the excess, you focus your intention, and you deliver not like a speaker, but like a mirror, allowing others to see themselves more clearly. In your words, this is not about being profound. It is about being honest. It is about saying what others feel but cannot say. It is about articulating the unspoken, not with complexity, but with courage. And when you do this, your words begin to live in people. They return in moments of decision. They guide in moments of confusion. They challenge in moments of comfort. And that is how you are remembered, not because you were loud, not because you were admired, but because you were true. You spoke with conviction. You spoke with direction, and you did not waste the moment. Leadership is not about filling time. It is about shaping it. And every time you speak, you are given the opportunity to shape the inner world of another, not by force, but by clarity, not by demand, but by depth. So you must speak like someone who knows the power of what they say, someone who respects the silence. They interrupt someone who does not use language to perform, but to elevate. For people do not remember noise, they remember the message that met them where they were and quietly asked them to rise. And now we complete the path, not with conclusion, but with continuation. For talk like a leader is not a moment, it is a practice, a discipline, not performed on stage, but forged in silence, refined in solitude, and lived in every interaction. Your voice is not a tool. You borrow, it is a reflection of who you are. And who you are is shaped, not by what you say once, but by how you train yourself daily, not when the lights are on, but when no one is watching, not when the stakes are high, but when the moment is small and quiet and ordinary. The leader does not wait for inspiration to speak with strength. They prepare, they practice, they reflect, they listen, they refine, because they know that when the moment arrives, when the room grows silent, and all eyes turn to them, it will not be time to rise. It will be time to reveal what has already been built. Your voice must be trained like a muscle, like an instrument, like a path, walked again and again until it knows the way, until clarity becomes instinct, until stillness becomes your tone, until every word carries the weight of your experience. And none of it is possible without daily effort. You must become aware of how you speak in the ordinary, how you speak to a friend, to a stranger, yourself, especially to yourself, for your internal voice is the soil in which your external voice grows. And if you speak to yourself with doubt, with apology, with fear, that energy will leak into every word you speak out loud. So the work begins there, in silence, in honesty and simplicity. You speak to yourself as one who is already whole. And from that wholeness, you begin to shape a voice that does not beg, does not chase, does not perform a voice, that stands steady even when challenged, that delivers truth without needing to decorate it, that inspires not through volume, but through alignment. And this is the voice people follow, not because they are told to, but because they feel its reality. It does not shake, it does not sell, it does not entertain, it leads. And it leads because it is built. And it is built because it is trained. And it is trained because it is respected. This is your task, to treat your voice, not as an accident, but as a responsibility. To sharpen it, not for attention, but for impact. To carry it, not for applause, but for guidance. And when you speak in this way, people follow not because you asked them to, but because you showed them something steady, something real, something they could trust, that is leadership, that is voice. That is the silent art of speaking as one who no longer needs to be heard to be followed, but who speaks and is followed, because what they say is true. To talk like a leader is not about speaking more, but speaking with clarity, strength, and presence. It begins with owning your words and letting them come from a place of stillness, not performance. Your voice must be trained, steady, and intentional, because people follow certainty, not noise, when you speak. You must move people, not just inform them. You must speak with urgency, direction, and honesty. Your words must be simple, strong, and earned through alignment with how you live weak talk, soft language. And constant disclaimers dilute your power, so you must drop the habits that make your message forgettable and embrace the kind of speech that commands attention without demanding it. A leader's voice does not shake under pressure. It does not change to please the room. It holds its ground with calm strength, and that calmness is what earns trust and respect. Influence is built when your words echo after the moment, when your message lingers, not because it was loud, but because it was true. And that kind of voice is not born. It is built through daily discipline, quiet repetition, and relentless self-awareness. So let me ask you this: when you speak, do people remember or do they forget? Share your answer in the comments. Thank you for being here. If this message resonates, please like and subscribe to support the next creation.